Okay, welcome back, Adam Valencic.
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be back.
AMP, owner of First Landings, number one sponsor and supporter of Runway Life podcast, the aviation podcast for everyone. So, we've got a new thing since you were last here. We're going to do a quick 5-shot burst on questions that you.
I was wondering, 5-shot burst.
We're not going to none of that today, but we do need to get out and do that soon.
Yeah.
Okay. So, IFR or VFR?
IFR or VFR? VFR.
Okay. Favorite airport?
Well, Popka, of course.
If you had to choose one person to take a flight with, who would it be? Famous, family, past, or present?
Oh man, that's a rough. I don't know, Howard Hughes.
Howard Hughes. That's a pretty epic one. I would have.
I feel like it would be kind of crazy.
Yeah, I would want to be in the back seat for that. ForeFlight or Garmin Pilot?
ForeFlight.
And digital or analog?
How about looking outside?
Perfect answer. Derek, I just clapped. Don't use that as being the cut point for the edit. So, from your last episode, we've got a few Q&As. And there's one of these that's kind of a difficult one. We might just, we'll see what we can do.
All right.
Okay. So, this is a question directly from somebody. I hate when pilots are told that preventative maintenance are the only things they can do. A pilot owner can perform almost any repair or maintenance under the supervision of an AMP.
I mean, yes, that's true. And I guess it's not even a pilot owner, anybody, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's how a lot of these techs start in the industry. They're working at a repair station or under an AMPIA. Mm-hmm. As long as they're under direct supervision per the 43.3D, I believe it is.
Right.
They can do that.
Yeah, I would dare say this question was probably from somebody that didn't necessarily read into what was being said.
Well, and a lot of people get on forums, right?
Yeah.
They get on Reddit, they get on whatever, and people start spewing stuff that they don't know, and it's, oh no, you have to be a mechanic to work on a plane.
Yeah. And I believe that question that I asked you was, what is a pilot allowed to do? Not what is a pilot allowed to do with the addition of an AMP or anything else.
Makes sense.
So I think, read into that one as you want. I would say if you happen to have an AMP in your backpack, back pocket, or in the back seat, then yeah. You
not
can
FaceTime. That's been made very clear by the FAA. And FaceTime does not count.
Then you can do whatever you want. But if you don't, you're out there on your own on a landing strip in the Bahamas somewhere, then yeah, you're stuck with what you are allowed to do under the rules and regulations. So
correct. Yeah, and tie it into also with the requirements to become an AMP. One of them, one of the options is 30 months of full-time experience.
Yep.
Essentially working under a direct supervisor, right?
Yep. And we had that discussion, we kind of said, if I have to pick somebody that I want to work on my plane, I want somebody that has experience, right? They've had the experience, they've met the requirements, but they've had a passion, obviously, for wanting to work on the nuts and bolts and the engines and really understand everything that's going on. So just a different feeling for me.
Sure.
This one seems like it is kind of a special question.
I'm glad you let me look at it and kind of look into it a little bit before me showing up here.
So how does the colonial legal interpretation of 2009 tie into preventative maintenance? Now, I'm going to try to give a little bit of backstory before we answer that.
I hadn't even heard of this.
Yeah,
when you asked, I thought it was a misspelling to start with.
All I can say is thank God for Google.
Yeah.
GTS, and hopefully everybody knows what I mean by that. Colonial was a legal interpretation for checking tire pressures on, I believe it was it was Learjet 90?
60, I think.
60,
yeah.
60. So that's really what that one is. This is a very nitty gritty kind of question. So I'm going to let you answer it the best you can. And always feel free. We might even link it. Actually, Derek,
probably
can we put a link into that question
yeah.
or that letter in the?
I would.
Comments.
It's long. It's 2 or 3 pages of legal interpretation. But from my summation, and I'm not an attorney, the way I read it is under Part 91 operations. Yes, it's preventative maintenance. A pilot can go out and check the tire pressure before he goes flying. If it falls under Part 135. A commercial operation, no, it has to be a mechanic.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not a lawyer. How they came up with that as their determination, I don't know. But we'll leave that to the FAA legal guys. They're paid the big bucks.
I would add into this. We actually I literally just said this. So when you're talking about legal rules and regulations, it's really what you read in black and white, and how you, don't leave that into interpretation. Leave that down to what you are reading. If it says you can do this, this, and this, then do this, this, and this, and not that. Don't try to overinterpret
and
it.
I think that's where this legal interpretation from this ruling kind of makes all that gray, because the FAA even says, yeah, this is a list, but it's a list of examples.
Right.
There may be other things that can fall on this list. We just didn't take the time to write them all down.
Yep.
So now if you do it, but it's not on the list, are you okay? It's kind of a gray area or catch-22 that the FAA has kind of set everybody up in.
Yeah, and putting, you get into some of that. I've been in a few different career fields, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not sure which way that one falls, where people like to write letters to the controlling agency to try to get in essence, what they're hoping for is a get out of jail free card, if you would.
Right.
Where, if I get this department, this 3-letter agency to tell me that I can do it, then I'm free and clear. So just, I
well,
would
except
say,
now that they know you're trying to do it, guess what?
Now they're going to tighten it up and then put in more interpretations or restrictions or whatever that might be. So, be careful when we reach out.
Yeah,
to
I think one of the
agencies.
latest Supreme Court rulings that will help a lot of this, because they've kind of put the restraints on all these 3-letter agencies making up their own rules without any kind of judge,
Which
jury,
one was
whatever.
that? What's the
I
name of
can't.
it?
It was.
I literally had the tab open for like 2 months on my phone, and I just closed it. It was deference.
Yeah, I can't. I can't remember exact, but I think it ties into that. The 3-letter agencies aren't. They just can't make up their own essential regulations anymore without legislative approvals.
Yeah. So be gentle on some of these things. During the 17-hour flight to San Diego. Okay, let me stop that for 1 second. What plane were you flying again?
That was a M20J Mooney.
Okay, so it was Mooney. So obviously it's not going to make it there without making a fuel stop or anything else.
Yeah, no, we didn't have extended range tanks or anything like that. No, we were definitely stopping. And that my bladder ain't going to make it that long. And I'm not a fan of those porta-john things you bring with. Nah,
those always leak. You end up with stuff inside the cockpit.
Right.
Nobody wants that. Okay, so during the 17-hour flight to San Diego, where did you stop for fuel and how many times?
So it was a total of 3 stops along the way, the 4th being San Diego. And we left out of Apopka like 6 in the morning or something. It was still dark. Sun hadn't risen. And our first stop was Alexandria, Louisiana.
Okay.
And I can't remember exactly. I'd have to open up my logbook to look at these times because that was 10-something years ago. From there, we made it across Texas into Hobbs. I believe that was New Mexico.
Okay.
And that was, I think we talked about it last time, was that basically entire leg was IMC.
Yep.
So that was fun. From Hobbs, from what I remember there, it was nasty winds because we had headwinds the whole way. But by the time we got out there, our elevation was high enough. Now they were on, starting at ground level all the way up.
Slow flight practice.
Exactly, yeah. Not wanting to be in slow flight. We were forced to be. And then from Hobbs, it was somewhere just outside of Tucson, Arizona. And then from there, San Diego.
Okay. And you just mentioned the IMC section of that flight, which falls into our fourth question. Fourth question. Why did you feel comfortable ferrying a flight for that long in IMC?
Oh, why wouldn't I, right?
I would dare say at this point, and I haven't looked at your logbooks, so you obviously had your instrument rating. Part of having that rating is not just getting the rating and then deciding you're going to go do whatever it is you want to do, but actually staying current and proficient inside of using those skills. You get into IMC, well, okay, fine. You've been vectored into that. You're talking to someone. It's safe. And you have a safety inside of there with autopilot, correct?
Yeah, it had an autopilot. So. And I'd add another layer to that, too, as being a mechanic.
Yeah.
Right? I had just done a pre-buy on this plane, test flown it, and I was already one leg into the journey. So after 4 hours of everything running as it should, you get pretty comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And the IMC, from what I recall, it wasn't, 200-foot ceilings or anything like that. I mean, ceilings were high enough that should there have been an emergency, by the time I broke out, I would have still had time to find a landing spot or an airport or whatever. So, sure, if it had been 200-foot ceilings, overcast, bad storms. I mean, there weren't any storms. It was just clouds.
It was just clouds. Yeah.
So I wasn't dodging storms or line or front or anything like that. So there's what your personal minimums are, right? Everybody talks about that. I felt comfortable flying in the clouds.
Yeah.
So why not? Why?
And I would bring into that by saying, well, which one would I prefer to do? Scud run?
That was the other alternative, right?
Or would I prefer to be in the clouds with altitude being my friend, right? You can choose, altitude or airspeed, choose wisely. You can trade one for the other at any point. But if an emergency happens, you've got a lot of, the more altitude, the better, right? You've got more options, you've got more time. And you get that more time gives you the opportunity to make better decisions. So,
exactly.
Yeah. I would much rather be in the clouds than scud running. So
for sure.
What are some of the things that separate good mechanics from average mechanics?
How do you define good or average?
Well, that's it. I am going off of the black and white that was put in front of me from a viewer. What I would say there, is obviously, I would think experience and the willingness to say, I'm going to fault find rather than, we just
yeah.
This, right?
I mean, that's, I guess, in regards to this question, that's what I would point to is a mechanic who's going to take the time to troubleshoot, try and figure out what's wrong with something, as opposed to, hey, we need to buy a $1,500 part and just replace it and hope that fixes it. Because I've had customers come to me that were at another mechanic and they can't figure out what's wrong with whatever electrical component or whatever, and guess what? It's a ground wire.
Yep.
We've swapped this, transducer, we've swapped out the, whatever, and come to find out the ground was bad.
Yep. And I, to a certain extent, I bring aviation into the boat world as well. Bring out another 1,000. Just throwing more parts at something and continually switching. Okay, well, this didn't work. Now we got to go to this, and now we got to go to this. You're $5,000, maybe up to $5,000, depending on what part you're working on, into something that Adam walked up and said, "Hey, did you check the ground on that?"
Right.
I mean,
I had one guy. They got an engine overhauled, and the mechanic that installed it was having a problem with it just vibrating really bad at idle, and over idle it would smooth out, it would make power and everything, and it was like, what is caused? They put on 3 different carburetors over, and went through one of the carburetors, looking at every single jet, trying to figure, looking at all this stuff. I happened to be at the same airport at the time, and they called me over to look at it, and I'm looking at the install, and I come around to one of the rear cylinders, and I noticed the primer port going into the intake is empty. And, I believe it was a Cherokee. They are only primed on 3 cylinders, so the 4th cylinder just normally has a plug.
Right.
No plug. Well, guess what? That baby's leaned out real well because it's sucking in air through that hole.
Yep.
And there's your problem. It's running lean all the time. It's just at the higher RPM, it's not noticeable.
That poor cylinder.
Yeah, I know, on a brand new motor.
Ouch.
So, you know, it's things like that where a lot of times it's something simple that, you know, there's a lot of symptoms and there's a lot of things you can point to for those symptoms, but the root cause is usually very simple. These simple engines, simple planes.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you know, so come back, you know, we'll circle back. A good mechanic, or, you know, maybe even into a great mechanic, is somebody that's going to have the experience to say, well, let's dive into this and find out what it is, what's wrong with it, what's causing it, before we just throw parts at things.
Right. I mean, even right now, we've got a fleet of all new Piper 100Is,
which are amazing, by the way. I will be flying one of those here very soon.
That's right. So one of them right now is throwing an error. Essentially, the G5 and the G3X aren't talking to each other.
Right.
And electrical it's very hard to figure out, right? So fortunately, we have a line of 6 of these guys, and we could change parts in between them to figure out, all right, is it the G3? Is it the G5? Is it what's going on here? Well, at this point, we've swapped everything around, and somewhere in the CAN bus between all these devices talking to each other, something's going to ground that we got to figure out. And it's taking the time now to go through every CAN bus pin and figure out where the data is getting corrupted between these things talking.
Right.
You know, I mean, sure, we could have gone out, and fortunately, we've got the parts to swap between them. But let's say you're a single owner, you take it to a shop, they're gonna be like, oh, well, your G3X, we've updated and everything. Well, it's bad, or your G5 maybe is bad, and now you're gonna be buying parts, but it's not fixing it, right?
I do love when somebody says, oh, well, it's got to be something just simple, like the G3, the G3X touch is bad. Okay, is that under warranty? No. Maybe, but I'm going to go with the worst case scenario.
Right.
No, it's not under warranty. How much is a replacement G3X touch nowadays?
Certified or not certified? There, yeah. I mean, gosh, I don't know, offhand, maybe $5,000-$6,000, something like that.
So, you know, very quickly we get into that $5,000 number that, you know, I kind of threw out earlier on. You've got to be willing to take the long road to find out what it is that's wrong, right? And when you do that, any ownership of anything can be brought, you know, that the cost of ownership of anything can be brought down if you are willing to put the time in, and you have somebody, a maintainer, a mechanic, a caretaker as well, that is willing to put the time in to say, this is weird, it's not working. Let me see if I can, you know, at least give some information to the mechanic to say, it only does it when this happens.
Exactly. That's the biggest thing. Or taking video.
Yep.
I tell all my instructors, if any problem that pops up, get me pictures, video, whatever, because telling me one thing, you know, you're going to tell me it from your eyes, which, you know, you're a pilot, an instructor, you're not a mechanic. So there's probably going to be details you miss.
Yep.
Completely normal, and I expect that. But that's where it's like, get me pictures and video, because then I can see everything going on. I can see all the data, and it makes it easier for me to diagnose.
Yep. And so, yeah. You know, give the pilot or give the mechanic a little bit more information than this isn't working. It would really be helpful. Question 6. I am thinking about getting into aviation mechanics. What are some things you wish you knew at the very beginning of your journey?
Oh boy. I mean, there's a lot to know, right? And kind of like they say, a private pilot's a license to learn. I mean, honestly, an A&P certificate is a license to learn, right? Because you've got to pass some written tests. You got to pass a practical test. You've kind of got to know the regs. But outside of that, you know, sure, you've gone to either a school and passed a test, or you've got 30 months experience. And in that 30 months, hopefully you retained everything you learned. But there's so much to know and do. I mean, the biggest thing is probably taking the time to dive into a lot of the more complex tasks. And I'd even say going into some of the stuff that isn't even done anymore would be helpful. Things like fabric work.
Yep.
There's still a lot of fabric covered planes out there, but not many people still working on them. And that's where, you know, if you have an interest in it and specifically those kind of niche areas, I mean, you could build a real good business for yourself and clientele base, because we need those kind of mechanics.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you and I talked about it when we actually had this discussion. But there's a lot of different mechanics out there that, you know, maybe they're not necessarily fresh out of school. They've not worked on a lot of hydraulic type systems. I have a pretty good amount of time around hydraulics, and I swear if you sneeze around the seal for a hydraulic and a piece of your hair from your beard gets in there, you could potentially create a big problem. So there's that learning experience is actually learning, hey, make sure you have a sterile environment, or one that as best as you can, so that you can seal that up. And that's before you even get into engines and oil leaks and everything else that could have been prevented, again, by the experience to know, hey, make sure you're working on it in a cleaner environment. It really helps. So what are some of the pros and cons of this new surge of pilots into the system?
Well, pros, I mean, we need them, right?
Yeah.
Both pilots and mechanics. I don't know the statistics off the top of my head anymore, but we've got a huge amount that are going to be leaving the system here in the next several years, and more people are flying. I think that drop off from COVID that everybody, I mean, I can remember articles, it was going to last 5-6 years. I think we've exceeded pre-COVID levels at this point. So it didn't last near as long as everybody thought. Cons, I mean, they're all green.
Yeah.
You know, and with as many pilots that are being replaced as quickly as possible, you're getting a lot of low-time guys getting into those front seats. Mm-hmm. And I know we've got this 1,500-hour rule, but in a lot of ways, they're all coming up through CFI training, or, you know, being a CFI or banner towing or what have you. They've all got 1,500 hours, but it's in a completely different environment.
Yeah.
You know, now you're getting into a jet with how many passengers behind you doing 300-something knots.
You got a little bit of performance anxiety at the very least, as well as the fact that now it's, you know, well, at least 10 times bigger than what you've used to fly in. You've been type rated in a simulator, which the best simulators in the world, and I mean, I've got some time in simulators. They're great, but I can still say they're the real thing.
I like the performance anxiety. I like that.
You know, you've got, you know, maybe 80 people, maybe 300 people sitting behind you that now they're waiting for you to get this plane on the ground, well, get it off the ground, fly to the location, and then get it onto the ground and do it flawlessly, because that's their expectation. Well, you know.
I mean, I know a lot of these, you know, I talk to the pilots who have left here and are captains and everything over the last few years, and it is, they tell me when they know they're getting into a cockpit with somebody who's green new, they assume they're the only pilot on that plane.
Yep.
I mean, it's scary in that respect, but something unique. Again, I know we touched on what kind of, you know, Jim and our chief pilot who you've interviewed here.
Yeah.
I know something unique he does. We've got access to a Boeing and an Airbus simulator. So one of the perks for these CFIs is we take them down there and they get time in that cockpit with him, 33,000 hours flying behind this stuff.
Yep.
And they get to get hands-on with that from somebody that experience before they go off into their interviews and get hired at the airline. So yeah, it's still not a lot, but at least it's a little bit of leg up from everybody else who's coming up through the system.
Well, I know, you know, the new modern day simulators. I mean, you know, I've spent some time in a Gulfstream simulator, and that thing was absolutely amazing. But it's still not. It's a little bit of a sampling of what you're going to walk into when you get to that next point, which is going through an entire type rating inside a simulator, and then turning up to like heavy metal to go fly that.
Right.
One day I will do that, and I'm sure I still will be in complete awe of the that emotional experience that I will have when I finally get to do it. So, okay. What are some of the, what makes first landings training unique compared to some of the surrounding schools? Now we're based, so let me clarify this. Wherever you are in the country, Orlando, Central Florida, we are 20 minutes to Disney, 25 minutes to Disney. It's a little town, but with an amazing airport that is XO4, and it's just outside of Apopka, Florida. So,
well, and just immediately around us is a very big population of flight schools.
Yeah.
I mean, within 20 minutes, 30 minutes of here, we've got 5 or 6 airports, and they've all got 1, 2, 3 flight schools each. So, I mean, there's a lot of options around here. What sets us apart, I mean, you got the easy stuff, right? We got a brand new fleet of aircraft between both our single engine and our multi. We've got, great facilities here. We are the FBO. We've got cheaper fuel. We're able to pass a lot of that savings on to our customers. We use a Gleim syllabus for all our training and online tracking and everything. So we've got a really good path for students, both in our 141 and 61 program.
Right.
So we also cater a lot to the career guys. We've got students that are here 0 all the way through their commercial ratings and going to the airlines. We also have a lot of recreational guys. Hey, I just want to get my private pilot, rent your planes, fly for fun. In fact, I think it was last weekend or weekend before, we had a whole group take all our planes out to St. Augustine. Or we ended up actually St. Augustine because of landing fees. And I know you guys are talking about this in another podcast. They changed it because St. Augustine was actually going to be quite expensive to go to, and they flew down south instead. So just something interesting there.
Yeah.
In addition to that, I think what really sets us apart is our chief pilot, Jim, and the experience and knowledge that he has that he shares with our instructors.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every instructor we have goes through a 2-week onboarding with him.
Right.
And there's constant communication between him and the instructors, and they then can take all that knowledge and pass it on to the students. And his door is always open for students. If they've got a question, he's there.
I was going to be a smart ass then and say, you work for Boeing, right?
He's worked for a lot of people.
Doors always open.
That's
Sorry.
right. Oh, that's good.
I blame.
I missed that one.
I completely blame Caitlin for that joke. Keep on coming back around. I'm sorry. I will stop now. But I would say that the other thing that really comes in for first landings, aside from everything else that you just mentioned, which is every single piece of that is amazing and great information. But if you went to Kissimmee, okay, there's 3 or 4 different flight schools that are down at Kissimmee Airport. Great airport, nice long runways, really wide, all the rest of it, right? However, you're going to taxi for 5 to 10 minutes to the run-up area before getting into the air. Okay.
Easily.
Here,
and then how long is your flight to the practice area?
Well, you've got another 7.5 to 10 minutes worth of flying to get to the actual practice area. And first-hand experience, first landings is the planes are literally right outside the door. You're going to throw on your high-vis, your safety vest, walk right out to the aircraft, pre-flight, get everything ready, go down to the run-up area that is about maybe 90 seconds. Maybe 90 seconds. We'll say 2 minutes max, okay? Do your run-up and then get up in the air. You from start-up to run-up to getting into the air, you're maybe 5 minutes.
Right. And then maybe our practice area is another minute and a half away.
Yep. I mean,
you leave the pattern and you're in the practice area.
And there's a lot of really good options for if you have to make an off-field. There is an awful lot of options that don't include having to land on something like 192 down in Kissimmee, where
let's hope that never happens.
I don't even know how people drive down there, never mind anything else. But yeah, I mean, that's a worst case scenario, but that's kind of how I look at a lot of different things. If I'm going to go practice somewhere, well, to start with, legally, you're not supposed to be practicing over in congested area anyway. But if you're going to go practice
regulations aside,
make sure that you've got the better areas where that could potentially have to happen. So, all in all, for me, first landings is a great option. You are responsible for building a culture and a great place. Locking down the FBO when you had the the option to do it was
it was clutch.
Yeah, that was clutch. But it was also, you know, the environment. You are a major part of this airport. You have been for 15 years. And I just want to say thank you.
No, thank you. I mean, well, here we go. Pour praise on each other, right? I think I like the idea of this Runway Life. When you came to me with this concept, I think it was a great idea, and I know it's going to be a huge success.
Yep.
So I'm happy for it.
I appreciate the faith, and you know, Derek, Caitlin, you know, they're absolutely amazing people. They work tirelessly at this, so we appreciate it. This is our first follow-up with you. I think we're at episode 9 or 10 now at this point.
Awesome.
So we're just going to continue to do bigger and better. Please, if you haven't already checked it out, the episode before this one will be an AOPA interview over landing fees. They're sneaking in across the country. Please do your due diligence in your local area, and keep an eye on it. Show up to those county commissioner or city commissioner meetings and speak your mind about why you don't think this should happen. It affects everybody. And I truly, personally, I believe it is led by a corporate nature that is wanting to just make a buck, but they're not thinking about the further implications for everybody else inside of aviation. So please do your part. We'll continue to do our part. And thank you very much for listening. Adam, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thanks. I enjoyed it.
Take care. Stay safe.
Thanks.